Europe conversation this week, I catch up with former President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker. He tells me about the end of an era regarding US military support for Europe, but why Ukraine is not ready to join NATO or the European Union just yet. President Juncker, former President of the European Commission, thank you very much for joining us in the Europe conversation. Yeah. We've heard really a lot about the US's pivot towards Russia. Are you trusting in the situation?
Not really. I know from the past, having met President Trump so many times, that he has friendly feelings when it comes to Russia and to the Russian president. I remember that he was, during the G7 meetings, advocating the membership of Russia in the G7, retransforming the G7 in the G8. And I have lost trust in Putin and in Russia, although having had good and friendship relations with Putin. But I was very surprised when Russia attacked Ukraine. I never believed that this could and would happen. But we need, I wouldn't say normal relations with Russia, but some relations with Russia, because Russia is part of Europe. And we cannot change geography. Russia will stay there where it is.
Do you believe, though, that the arrest warrant for Putin at the International Criminal Court should stand and should remain as part of any peace negotiations?
I do think that the European Union and Ukraine, of course, has to have a place around the negotiation table. If you are not sitting around the table, you are on the menu. And the ambition of the European Union is not to be on the menu. We want to be part of those who are cooking a final solution for the Ukrainian-Russian conflict.
But do you believe the warrant for his arrest should stand?
I don't know what I have to understand from what Putin and Trump are saying. One day they are saying the place of the European Union should be around the table. The other day they are saying, no, we don't want to have the Europeans being part of the negotiation. I do think that Europe has to be part.
You do think Europe has to be part?
Yeah.
And what about NATO membership? Do you think that's something that should be strongly considered by the US for at least unoccupied territories of Ukraine?
You know, this is not a short-term matter. As long as Ukraine is under attack and is in war, Ukraine cannot become a member of NATO. Ukraine can become, although this is not a short-term issue too, of the European Union, because Ukraine has a clear European perspective. NATO is a different thing. As long as Russia is attacking the Ukrainian territory, Ukraine cannot become a member of NATO. Would it become a member of NATO, we would put ourselves in the application of the logics of Article 5 of the NATO Treaty, and I don't think that this is in the interest of Europe for the time being.
Do you think that Putin has a point then when he says to Trump that the reason why he invaded Ukraine was because of the expansion of NATO?
No, I don't think that this is the case. First, we never promised Russia to abstain from expanding to Eastern and Central Europe. That was never promised and never said and never written down. Second, of course, the West did make some mistakes in its relation with Russia.
Like what?
But I will not tell you what I consider having been a mistake, because there is never a good reason for making war. If we are saying, well, we could have done this, or we could have done that, or we could have abstained from doing this, or from abstaining from doing that, this, in the eyes of Putin and of the Russian public opinion, would be seen as reasons which allowed Russia to attack Ukraine. But there are no good reasons for starting a war. It's easy to start a war. It's very difficult to stop a war.
When you look back at the last 3 years and how Europe has defended and supported Ukraine, How would you assess that?
The fact is that the Europeans never wanted to become part of the war. We were showing solidarity with Ukraine. We did what we could do, taking into account the basic feelings of the public opinions of the European countries. We could have done more, but...
like what?
Providing with ammunition and with weapons, but that's a difficult issue in Europe because we didn't have war experience since the end of the Second World War, so it's not an easy step to be taken by Europeans.
But were we too slow?
To become, to some extent, part of the war. I think, honestly spoken, that we were too slow, but I know how difficult these decisions are when they have to be made in Europe. So
NATO membership is not the right thing right now, but what about the move to EU membership? You said as far back as actually just a short time ago in 2023 that Ukraine was deeply corrupt and that we shouldn't be looking towards Ukrainian membership of the EU because it's not fair in Ukraine nor the European Union. Is that your position?
The European Union has to be very careful when admitting new members. Ukraine is not ready for membership. The economy is not in a position that it could easily take part in the European internal market. The state structure of Ukraine is not reflecting basic European values at 100%. There is corruption in Ukraine. The Ukrainians themselves, they were always telling me when I was negotiating with them back in 2014-19 that they have a problem with corruption. We were always discussing with the then President Poroshenko and then Zelensky ways and means how to combat and to fight against corruption.
But I mean, they would say, and President von der Leyen would say, that they are making huge inroads with de-oligarchization and moving towards the rule of law system, and that they could potentially be ready by 2030.
But I'm accepting that Ukraine is making progress on these different issues we were mentioning. I would be in favor of a membership which would not be a total membership.
Like membership minus?
Membership minus, but membership without institutional dimensions.
So without, let's say, a vote of the Council, for example?
No vote in the Council, but participation in European debates on issues which are of interest and concern for Ukraine, not giving them the impression that they are far away from membership, but showing that they are on the way to membership, but not having all the rights and all the possibilities of real membership.
So access to the single market, for example?
No, single market. Defense matters when the European Union will be in a situation where it has really a defense dimension, which is not the case as we are speaking. So part membership would, for the time being, be the only possible way, I think.
Because you said in the past that we've had bad experiences with so-called new members in relation to the rule of law.
Not all the new members are an example of deep respect of the rule of law, and we have to make sure that this weakness will not be enlarged by new members which would not respect the rule of law.
Where do you see this has impacted the European Union when you look at the likes of Hungary and Slovakia, in the past Poland, that disregarded the single market rules, disregarded Article 2 of the EU treaties?
I think that this was a failure both by those you were mentioning and by the European Union. We were not strict enough. I was not strict enough, although we were fighting with Slovakia and with Hungary in that respect. At the very beginning of this stepping away from those countries from the mainstream rules of the European Union, we were treating that with to benign neglect.
Okay. Just before I let you go, there is going to be a very important, momentous discussion around security and defence, a white paper from the European Commission. How strong should this be? What would you advocate for? Would you advocate again for common borrowing to spend on defence?
I think that the moment has come to strengthen the European pillar of NATO. Not in recent years, but years ago, decades ago, the Americans didn't like the idea that the European dimension of NATO would become stronger. Now they are asking, rightly so, for it. And so we have to increase our military budgets everywhere in Europe. I'm not mentioning a percentage because 5% is really not feasible, although Poland has 4.7%. So it's feasible but
more in the medium term, but in the short term.
In the short term, it's not feasible, but the budgets have to be increased. I'm not advocating an aggressive European NATO pillar, but the European part of NATO has to be able to defend itself, because we cannot rely on the everlasting American support and protection. That's over. We are reaching the end of a period and the end of an era, and we have to take this into consideration and not forget it when things have been normalized as far as Ukraine and Russia are concerned.
Okay, President of the European Commission, or former President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, thank you very much for joining us on the Europe Conversation.
Thank you for having me.